The idea of how the bosses in Paper Mario TTYD would stack up in Paper Mario 64 came from a comment under one of my previous videos. I like this idea, so let's talk about it. Naturally, the Paper Mario TTYD bosses were designed to be battled in Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and this means we had to make a lot of assumptions. As such, here are my ground rules. Boss AI will match the original game. If something is guaranteed to happen, whether it's because the boss has already predetermined its moves, or you do enough damage to the boss, it will happen in the other game. Chapter bosses will be considered fought with the player having the tools they have access to by the end of the chapter. I will also try applying this logic to mid-bosses as best as I can. Because most TTYD bosses can actually attack either the front or the back at will if they want to, if a boss's attack can choose what it's targeting, it will always target the front. But if a boss would specifically target the back, or is using an attack that hits both Mario and his partner, then the partner will be vulnerable to the attack. This is to say that boss moves will work as they do in TTYD, but will function according to 64's battle engine. And with that, on with the video. After defeating Lord Crump with no action commands, and then defeating the blooper with action commands, we encounter the first chapter boss, Hooktail. Compared to the Koopa Bros, Hooktail feels just unfair. The prologue in Chapter 1 in Paper Mario 64 feels fairly barren compared to TTYD, which gives you much more to actually work with. Amongst the things you don't have because this is 64 is Hooktail's weakness, whether that's attack effects R or attack effects G. Meaning throughout the entire fight, you're getting hit by attacks that do 4 and 5 damage every turn. And that 4 damage attack hits your partner too. And if your partner gets hit in TTYD, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, it'll hurt a lot, but you still have HP to allow you to keep fighting on in spite of that. In 64, however, if your partner gets hurt, they will be unable to act at all for a number of turns equal to the amount of damage they've taken from that one attack. And Hooktail's Fire Breath does 4 damage, and nothing is really stopping her from being able to use that move repeatedly, so you better guard. Especially since she will always use that move on the first turn, but never on the second, so you have that to look forward to at least. Your options for healing are also limited to items and nothing else, because keep in mind, you don't have access to refresh until after Chapter 1. But on the flip side, this also means that Hooktail doesn't get a second phase because there's no audience to eat. So after her initial 20 HP is taken out, the fight is over and you win. Which is still a really tall order because keep in mind, you don't have ranked up partners, there's no badge shop, and with Hooktail having a point of defense, Power Bounce is basically invalidated. But it is still possible. If you wanted to only rank up your BP, you have the option for FP+, which would allow you to use Bomb 3 times without having to heal. Bombette's Bomb would do 4 damage after Hooktail's point of defense. And while Mario himself doesn't have much beyond Power Jump for damage, it is enough alongside Bombette's Bomb to do 14 damage after 2 turns. In which case, Bombette can Body Slam and you can finish Hooktail off with a Thunderbolt, ending the fight in only 3 turns. A brutal fight for sure, and one that demands that you're familiar with what 64 gives you, but at least it's over quickly. The very next boss fight, the Shadow Sirens, is a little tricky to think about. You fight them before you get Flurry as a partner, so I think it's fair to say you don't have access to Parry Carry yet. And because of that, your partners are still not ranked up either. Because this is 64, you don't have access to Earth Tremor, and that means your options for dealing with all 3 Sirens at once are fairly limited. However, if you were to ask me, I would say that attacking all 3 Sirens at once is an actively bad idea. This is because when Beldum or Marilyn have their HP go below half, or their HP is exactly half of their max in the case of Vivian, they will use their elemental magic, which with the exception of Beldum, you can't guard. And yes, those attacks would be unguardable in 64 because unguardable attacks do exist in this game. So you want to proceed with caution, lest you let your partner get knocked out for 3 full turns with no means of counterplay. One strategy you can employ is using either Power Jump or Power Bounce to bypass Beldum's HP trigger so that she doesn't command her sisters to use their magic attacks. You also have access to a Shooting Star, which you can find after visiting Shooting Star Summit in the prologue. This item does a full 6 damage to all enemies on the screen, which is in actuality as good as Earth Tremor is. Overall, you would have to proceed with caution, but this fight wouldn't be too hard to clear. Oh yeah, and say goodbye to Vivian. We won't be seeing her again in this video. If you know, you know. With Parakarry in tow, a lot of the game opens up to us. Not only do we have access to super blocks, allowing us to rank up our partners, We also have access to the Super Hammer, making our hammer stronger and doing 4 damage in total. And that leads us nicely into the fight with Magnus von Grapple. Now after Hooktail, this boss is an absolute cakewalk. I doubt anyone would be surprised to hear that. You have no good reason to use your jump in this boss fight, unlike Koopa, who was actually elevated, and as a result, you'd have to use Hammer Throw to actually reach him with your hammer. But Magnus is grounded. It also means that without FP, your hammer does 3 damage, which is actually above average for Mario. And if you really wanted it, you can go into the Toad Town tunnels and get Power Smash, allowing Mario to do 5 damage for only 2 FP. Alongside Parakarry, whose Shell Shot would do 5 damage after the 1 point of defense, since logically you're going to rank him up, this fight will be very short. Additionally, and I find this to be really funny, Magnus 1's quick attack would not be able to hurt Parakarry, and as a result, it would not be able to knock him out. Now with good guarding, this was true for Koopa's magic spell too, but at least that fight actually carried the risk of knocking out your partner. The only thing that Magnus really has over Koopa is that the X-Fists are harder to eliminate. And even then, not really. Not only can Parakarry one-shot them, but Mario can use either Power Blocks or Fire Flowers to good effect here. This boss is a joke. Rescue Mamar and be on your merry way. Chapter 3 has a number of bosses you're forced to encounter, but only 2 you have to actually defeat. This is to say that yes, you do fight Bowser in Chapter 3, and funnily enough, in this fight, he doesn't have the Star Rod, so he's actually possible to defeat already, so this fight is actually fairly simple. And thanks to Peach, you also have Power Rush, so the potential for Jump to do more damage than Hammer has finally been unlocked. Though it's Bowser, you really don't need it. Yes, his Fire Breath can hurt your partner and knock them out for 3 turns, but if you guard it, it just takes 3 Power Smashes and 3 uses of Parakarry's Shell Shot and you win. A shame we can't really use Bow yet, but I guess that's what Rock Hawk is for. And speaking of Rock Hawk, I think this fight would actually be a fair bit of a doozy in 64. Not because Rock Hawk is particularly terrifying to fight, but after you beat him, you'd have to immediately afterwards fight Macho Grubba without having a chance to heal. Or save for that matter, because why not? That being said, if you opt to fight Rock Hawk without using damage dodge, this fight really would not be that bad. Under our rules, his Rock and Roll would be his only real move capable of hurting our partner. I don't know if that's actually the attack name, but that's what I'm going with. Meanwhile, his Air Slide and Superman Slam would only hit Mario, and the damage they do is actually pretty high. You also don't have access to any defense boosting badges until after Chapter 3 is completed, and that means you'd have to block every individual hit of the prop drop. However, this is where Rock Hawk's phase triggers come into play. He can't use the prop drop until his HP falls below 14, and he can't use the Superman Slam until his HP falls below 27. Moreover, you have access to Mega Rush. With 2 basic attacks from Mario and Bo both, who should be super ranked by now, Mario merely would have to guard the first attack and not guard the second, the Superman Slam. With Rock having 22 HP left and Mario having only 1, you can Power Bounce, and getting at least 4 hits off of that move can then see Bo finish him off with Smack. You wouldn't have to do that to win. If Rock gets on the ceiling, you can use either Bo or Mario's Hammer Throw to get him down. I'm just a big fan of rushing bosses down. As for Macho Grubba, you may or may not level up after fighting Rock Hawk, and with how this boss was designed, fighting him will be no easy task. The only thing you're guaranteed to see with him is that he will always make himself fast if he doesn't have the fast status applied yet. Otherwise, anticipating how much damage he'll be able to do to you is impossible. If he ups his attack power, he can do as much as 7 damage, and if he boosts defense or makes himself dodgy, he'd be doing only 4. And because Mario's always being targeted, he'd be taking damage really freaking quickly. Let's not forget that in 64, you can't super guard. And 60 HP is a lot. That's as much as Junior Troopa in Chapter 8. Compared to Tubba Bubba's Heart, who you only have the damage for 45 damage before he runs away, and has his attacks designed around being able to evade them, you can see now why a boss like Macho Grubba in 64 would be so problematic. Worst case, you still have options like Lullaby and Sleep Stomp to put Grubba to sleep, which honestly would pair really well with Mega Rush. And if you're starting this fight in peril, that is definitely an option, particularly if you have items to restore your FP but not your HP. Another word of advice though, whenever Grubba starts being able to use his Lariat, which he'll be able to do once his HP falls to half or lower, that lariat would be able to hit your partner too, so you better be ready to guard it. It's also then he'll be able to actually charge his attack, meaning he'll be able to do 8 damage in a single hit. It would be simply disgusting. With this all in mind, Macho Grubba would definitely be difficult. But like any other boss, there are a fair few ways you can even the playing field if you know what to look out for. You could also just use the fact that Grubba cannot attack your partner until later in the fight to your advantage by having Goombario charge a bunch and then knock him out in a single shot. It would take a while, but it is in fact an option. There's also Zap Tap, which would protect your partner completely, as Grubba would have to get past Mario first to actually hurt your partner then. All I can say is good luck. You're gonna need it. Fortunately, after Chapter 3 is where the game becomes considerably easier for you. Not because Starstorm is that good of a move, it's actually because A, the bosses in Chapter 4 aren't particularly strong, and B, it's from here on out that your defenses start to really snowball. Being that this is Paper Mario 64, there's never really a chance for Duplis to dupe you and take your partners away from you. And with a measly 4 attack power, your defenses are just too strong for him to really be able to do anything of note to you. He also just has nothing that can hit your partner, so overall, this boss would be a cakewalk. And even if he did dupe you, you have both damage dodge and defend plus, so none of your partners would be able to hurt you so long as you manage to guard. And despite having only one partner, her being Watt, not even Cooper would be able to reach her if he used Power Shell because she's airborne. And you'd be able to super rank her thanks to the availability of Super Blocks, which means having Turbocharge, which also means you can do more damage more quickly with your jump skill. No matter what, Duplis would not stand a chance. Now, I don't know how much HP all the partners would have, and you have 5 of them, being Goombario, Cooper, Bombette, Parakarry, and Bo. So if you want, feel free to fill in the blanks for me in the comments down below. Meanwhile, there's also the optional boss Atomic Boo, and with this boss, basically everything it has hits your partner. But with only 40 HP max, this fight would not be that long. Just the previous chapter you fought Macho Grubba, by comparison this is not going to be hard. Especially if you wait until after you finish Chapter 4 and you have Chilled Out as a special move. As with this move, you can now reduce enemy attack by 3 for 4 turns. It's an insanely powerful defensive move to have. That being said, only time will tell how much we actually use it. And with the Chapter 5 boss being Cortez, I can already tell you we do not need this move here. In 64, Chapter 5 is where you get the Ultra Hammer, allowing Mario to do 6 damage in one hit without FP. And this makes the fight against Cortez particularly interesting. On one hand, the fact that Cortez has several different phases means that Chill Out would not be very effective here. Cortez also has an attack in his first phase which specifically targets the back. As turn 1 he'll attack the front for 4 damage, turn 2 he'll attack the back for 4 damage, turn 3 he randomly chooses to attack either the front or the back, which sees him attack 4 times for 2 damage per hit, and it just loops from there. While in his second phase, you can actually see him charge an attack which does 8 damage to both Mario and his partner. And in phase 3, while most targets here can only attack one target at a time, the Rapier can actually target both Mario and his partner simultaneously. So this guy's got a lot to look out for. On the other hand, it's by now you have access to Last Stand, and with damage dodge, most of Cortez's attacks would not be able to hurt you at all. And with Chill Out, not even his charge attack in phase 2 would be able to hurt you. But the reality is that none of that really matters. Each phase that Cortez has only 20 HP. And in addition to Mario having his Ultra Hammer, you can also rank up your partners even further, and Watt can become Ultra Rank thanks to the Ultra Stone availability in Chapter 5. With Mario's Hammer doing 5 damage after Cortez's defense, and Watt piercing that defense to do 5 damage of her own with Electro Dash, Mario and Watt together can actually 2-round KO Cortez's phases with his max 20 HP per phase. Yet with that in mind, Cortez would not be able to really do anything. You'd knock out phase 1 before he had a chance to hurt Watt. Phase 2, Mario's Hammer has to attack the Bone Pile, which forces him to charge, so he wouldn't get to attack period. And in phase 3, you have Starstorm to make sure that he can't actually use his weapons. And also something funny to keep in mind, after Watt attacks him he'd have 8 HP left, he would not be able to eat the audience's souls, because there's no audience in Paper Mario 64. And with one more round of attacking, Cortez has already lost without even having a chance to really be able to win. And you wouldn't even need FP to do it. That just might be the saddest boss fight so far. By comparison, Lord Crump in Chapter 5 would be more threatening, solely because the X-Nauts actually would have the opportunity to damage your partners. Both the forks that the X-Nauts would be able to drop down on Mario and his partner, as well as the X-Naut ball that Lord Crump rides in Phase 2 would be capable of actually damaging them for either 4 or 5 damage. That being said, assuming your guards are on point, you can just equip Last Stand and Damage Dodge, and those 2 badges alone make Mario literally impossible to hurt as long as he's in danger. Crump is also extremely weak to being put to sleep, and you've had access to Sleepy Swamp ever since beating Chapter 2, which, for context, is just as likely to work against Lord Crump as it is against Kenshi Koopa. Alongside Bo, whose smack would one-shot the X-Nauts if there's only 6 or 25 of them, and has Fan Smack for the platoon of 500, it's still fairly easy to shut Lord Crump down. You may have to be careful around Phase 2 because after depleting his first 30 HP, it will be his turn to attack, assuming both Mario and his partner already acted in that very turn. But aside from that, Lord Crump is no sweat. The following boss is one of the most unique as far as design goes, in that it's Smorg. As far as TTYD was concerned, this boss was flooded with RNG. As there really weren't very many good ways to guarantee Smorg would target only one character, and that made playing around the damage fairly difficult. However, by 64 rules, the Phase 1 miasmas would only be capable of targeting Mario, meaning all RNG is just gone. You've also had access to Jump Charge since Chapter 4, but in Chapter 6 is where you now get Super Jump Charge, allowing you to charge your jump by +3 damage for 4 FP. Also, despite not finding the Ultra Boost in Chapter 6, you have Lucky Lester as a partner, and with his help can get the Ultra Boost before you fight Smorg. With a few uses of Super Jump Charge alongside Power Bounce, and Mega Rush, since manipulating Mario's HP would be really easy here, this fight could end extremely quickly. And if you didn't want to do that, then that's fine. You've got Power Quake, which does just enough damage unboosted to knock the miasmas out in one shot. Really, before Phase 2, how much damage you take from Smorg is entirely within your control. In Phase 2, however, when Smorg's HP falls to 25 or lower, this is where things can start getting scary. Because Smorg's Claw not only hits both Mario and his partner, but it does a whopping 10 damage in a single hit. If you fail to guard that, your partner is dead. Like, dead. Yeah, you can immediately take it out with Mega Quake, which does 6 damage to both the Claw and Smorg itself, but your partner losing a full 10 turns because of getting hit by that Claw, yeah, that would leave Mario fighting alone. There would still be ways you can survive in spite of having your partner being knocked out by the Claw, whether relying on badges that make Mario virtually unkillable like Last Stand, or just taking advantage of your special moves like Smooch and Starstorm. But the long and short of it is this: if you let your partner get knocked out early, you're in for a bad time. Nearing the end of the game, you have Chapter 7's boss, which is Magnus Von Grapple 2.0. On one hand, Magnus 2 is considerably less dangerous to fight without the audience cannon, since as you already know, there's no audience in Paper Mario 64. That being said, you also have Chill Out as an option. So in reality, not having the audience cannon really only means that there's one less attack that Magnus 2 can use that would do absolutely nothing. Not much of a nerf with that in mind, now is it? To be fair, you probably would not want to use Chill Out all that much because of the X punches doing 9 damage per hit. And yeah, that'd be pretty dang lethal, and your only means of getting rid of them would mean attacking them, since in TTYD Hurricane wouldn't work because it doesn't work against Magnus 2. And trying to fill up a meter to determine a status ailment actually landing, or if you're able to immediately one-hit KO an enemy, checks for the susceptibility of everyone on the opposing side. And I know you wouldn't try to use Parakarry's Airlift here, and sadly, Lucky Lester's Spiny Surge would not do enough damage being capped at only 4 when the X punches have 5 HP. So your only real options to wipe them out quickly would be Parakarry's Air Raid, Sushi's Tidal Wave, or Bombette's Mega Bomb. Though I have to imagine that Watt's Mega Shock would be very good here too. Worst comes to worst, if Mario is in danger and you have both Last Stand and 2 damage dodges equipped, Magnus 2 wouldn't really be able to do anything without the X punches, and again, those get wiped out by Starstorm. There's also enough focus badges, that being 2, where you can just attack normally, guard every attack you get hit by, Starstorm when necessary, and focus to build your SP back up so that you can just Starstorm again whenever you have to. So you're still fairly safe to play the long game if you wanted. Just beware, if you ever miss a guard in this boss fight, your partner is not coming back up. 6 turns is a long time to be stunned. And since your partners would just see no relief whatsoever, I imagine Mario must be feeling really lonely. But for what it's worth, doing 6 damage per turn is about on par with, Tubba Blubba. Yeah. With the 7-star spirits in tow, we now have every special move in the game alongside Starbeam as an attack. A move that costs 0 star energy to use, and it removes positive status buffs from all enemies we fight on screen. You normally just never use this move in Paper Mario 64, aside from when you use it for Bowser because you generally don't need it. But the Chapter 8 bosses in TTYD actually have a fair few statuses they can use to make themselves stronger. The first amongst these being Gloomtail. Just like his younger sister, Hooktail, Gloomtail's first attack will always be his Poison Breath, which can hurt your partner. He also can just bite you as a regular attack, which you can't guard whatsoever, and can stomp on you, which actually can be guarded. Because of how his attacks are designed, relying on damage dodge here isn't actually a good idea, since if you want to fight with your partner here, you have to be adaptable. It is worth noting, however, that his Earthquake can't hurt partners that are airborne. Parakarry, Bo, Watt, and Lakileser would all avoid it, but both Parakarry and especially Lakileser, in my opinion, would be fairly lackluster choices for this boss. As far as the Mega Breath is concerned, Gloomtail has to dedicate a turn to actually charging it up first, and that gives you plenty of time to Starbeam the charge away, making the Mega Breath no stronger than Poison Breath without the chance of actually poisoning you. Naturally, there's a lot to plan around here, but there actually is a fairly effective workaround as well. If ever you find your HP to be less than 5, you can control the pace of the fight fairly well by using Power Bounce and HP Drain, but those patches won't protect you against poison. That's where Feeling Fine would come in, allowing Mario to just take 4 damage no matter what Gloomtail tries to throw at him, and power bouncing to 5 HP every turn, only ever guarding when the Earthquake is used. It just goes to show that the best offense in 64 is a good defense. Up next in Chapter 8, we have to fight the Shadow Sirens Round 2. And Vivian is strangely missing, but I cannot tell you why that is. Like earlier, Marilyn has her lightning, but unlike earlier, now she can use it whenever she wants. And that lightning cannot be guarded, and it hits both Mario and his partner. So you think you'd just be forced to fight the Sirens with Mario and no one else, right? Well, fortunately wrong. Even though your partners cannot defend against the lightning at all, you have Watt. And Watt, being a little sparky, is completely immune to electricity. So she would really be the only partner you could fight with. You'd still have to worry about Belladum's Blizzard, which she is guaranteed to use turn 1, and it hits both Mario and his partner, and it can freeze. But she fortunately doesn't use it very often. Unlike Gloomtail, the RNG in this fight really can't be controlled in any meaningful way. My advice would just be to knock out Marilyn as soon as possible, but if she charges, unless you can knock her out that very same turn, use Starbeam to debuff her, and in doing that, you would waste Marilyn's turn. It would also be a good idea to do that move when Belda makes either herself, Marilyn, or Dupless fast, since she'll always do that on turn 3. Something interesting I learned recently is that if Watt was to attack Mario, Electro Dash doesn't pierce his defenses, so you wouldn't have to worry about that if Dupless did transform into Watt. That being said, he would still be electrified, and Watt would not be able to damage herself. So if I were you, I'd equip Zap Tap. Or even Hammer Throw, that actually would be a decent move to use here. Chill Out would also be fantastic and would make Marilyn near harmless. As with Defend Plus and your 2 damage dodges, she would not be able to break through Mario's defenses without her lightning. Once Marilyn is down though, you're fairly free to fight however you really want to. And the fight from there would not be too bad. It's just getting to that point that's the hard part. Greeting us next would be Grodus. And it's here where our defenses start to really shine through. Starting off, what Grodus can do. His lightning and fire would hurt Mario and his partner, but Watt is immune to electricity. So it's really only the fire you have to worry about. But if you're willing to brave Grodus with other partners, it's here I have to ask a question. Would Starbeam be able to break through Grodus' barrier if he has all 4 Grodus X's, or would it not be able to do that? Because that's literally what it was designed to do in Paper Mario 64. I think it'd be really funny, and the shield would just regenerate if all the Grodus X's were still alive at the start of the next turn, but maybe you think differently, so let me know in the comments down below. Just know that with Grodus having 4 Grodus X's around him and not being invincible, his defense would technically be 5. Though that added Grodus X defense would not protect him against certain elemental attacks like Hooper's Fire Shell, Bombet's Bombs, and Sushi's Water. And yeah, there's also Watt's Electro Dash, but she pierces defenses anyway. I don't imagine you'd have much in the way of actually attacking Grodus' Scepter, so there ain't much you can really do to disable his attacks. Not unless you use Mario anyway, but that'd be super inefficient regardless, so I wouldn't recommend it. The Grodus X's at least would make it really easy to reach Peril if you wanted to, since they'd only be able to attack Mario. But picking a moment to actually knock Grodus out could be tricky thanks to being able to cast Dodgy or Payback status at will. Or at least it would be, but again, you have Starbeam. All the more reason to use Watt. She basically can't be stopped thanks to Mario. The fight will be slow for sure, what with the Grodus X's always respawning, but with a bit of patience, you can get it done. As far as the fight to immediately follow Bowser and Kammy Koopa is concerned, this is where Starbeam can be really useful in being used as a battering ram to really keep these two down. With neither Bowser or Kammy being capable of piercing defense, Mario being in danger and having Last Stand and 2 damage dodges will completely invalidate anything they could do to attack, as that combination of badges blocks any and all damage up to 7 points. And Kammy can't counter by making Bowser huge or anything, because if she did try to do that, A, she's not healing herself, so the partner's damage will add up, and B, Mario has Starbeam to immediately debuff Bowser. Just like in the actual Paper Mario 64, Starbeam hard counters any magic that Bowser has going for him. Kammy herself is also just really good at healing over and over if she wanted to. And it'd be in Mario's best interest to focus on her as soon as possible. Fortunately, most of her assisting magic doesn't really help very much thanks to Starbeam, but it is still overall harder to outpace her actual healing ability, because Mario doesn't have Art Attack or Spin Jump, so actually defeating her may take a while. Especially since Bowser and Kammy attacking you at the same time means Mario will have to heal fairly frequently. Though this can be alleviated somewhat by using Chill Out, Bowser's attack is dropped to as little as only 4, and Kammy does only 2, so this would be a decent workaround. Also, if we assume this is the Switch version Bowser fight, where you can't force Bowser to only ever bite using Zap Tap or anything like that, then your partner is just always in danger of getting knocked out by his Fire Breath, which in my opinion really screams as to how consistent you'd have to be in order to win. It's also worth acknowledging that Kammy Koopa can heal Bowser at any time she wants, but will only start healing herself once her HP falls below 30, so you may be able to finish her off quickly if you attack her with good timing. And that covers those two. I don't know if you would actually fight Bowser and Kammy immediately after Grodus without being able to save. It's a bit hard to say when there's actually less bosses in 64 than in TTYD, meaning you'd actively have more bosses to fight in this game. But I guess if we really wanted to be accurate to 64, Bowser and Kammy would immediately wipe out Grodus before he had a chance to fight us, like Junior Trooper with the Koopa Bros. Though in my opinion, that just seems like a lame cop-out. Only one boss to go, the Shadow Queen, the feared demon who once plunged the world into darkness. But in Paper Mario 64, she's yet another victim to its mechanics. If you've been paying attention up to this point, you already know that the Shadow Queen is in fact unable to damage Mario because of her attack power being 7 and no higher. She does have ways to boost her attack power, whether through using Power Lift or using Charge, but both of those moves are susceptible to being Starbeamed away. And without those two moves, there's just nothing the Shadow Queen can do. She is entirely at the mercy of the player actually screwing up, meaning she would not be capable of just repeatedly healing from stealing Mario's HP. And speaking of stealing HP, remember that you have no audience, meaning she can't steal the audience's souls. Granted, I think that detail is actually cosmetic, and she'll start with a max HP for Phase 3 anyway, but let's be frank, with the length of this boss fight, you'd want any advantage you could get. So let's say she wouldn't heal because that would only make sense. Now, if you opted to fight the Shadow Queen without using danger strats, well then this fight would just be free. Because the Shadow Queen will never transform as long as her HP remains above 90. So nothing would stop you from just being able to charge a bunch, knocking out most of her HP, albeit not dropping her to 0, because if you did do that, her HP will be set back up to 90 in the second phase, and then just picking her up into true final battle. Yeah, fighting the Shadow Queen without an audience would break this boss fight completely. So let's say you didn't do that, because that would be way cheaper than using Mega Rush in my opinion. Well, let's just say you'd be in for a tough fight. The Shadow Queen has 2 moves that can hurt your partner. Her Dangerous Breath, which does 4 damage and can set as Mario at the same time, and her Dark Pulse, which she can only use after she charges first. And bear in mind, if you Starbeam the charge away, she will still use Dark Pulse the very next turn, just without the extra power behind it. Otherwise, the challenge in this boss fight would purely come down to just being able to beat out her healing. which she can only do with her left and right hands. Alternatively, she can also swap those hands out for her dead hands, which can attack on the very same turn that she brings them out on. Which, fun fact, they have an attack that cannot be super guarded, but it can still be guarded just fine. So in 64, it really is just like any other roll attack. At the end of the day though, the difficulty of the Shadow Queen largely comes down to the fact that this fight is an absolute marathon, and Paper Mario 64 gives you considerably less to work with. Remember that only Mario can use items, meaning your partners are limited to nothing but attacks. And with Badges and Mega Rush being generally weaker in this game, you don't have very many good ways of actually boosting your attack without using something like Super Jump Charge. Let's also keep in mind that you have only 10 items max, so no Strange Sack. And your means of actually suppressing the Shadow Queen's left and right hands without using Mario basically come down to Kooper's Fire Shell, Bombette's Power Bomb, and Sushi's Tidal Wave. And yes, Parakarry's Air Raid, though you have absolutely no reason to really use that move. Or really Parakarry in general here. Ultimately, if you're not relying on danger strats here, the Shadow Queen has to be one of the most formidable bosses in the entire game. And an absolute titan amongst the many titans this game is already throwing at you. And there you have it. Aside from Bonetail, that's every boss in Paper Mario with Thousand Year Door if they were in Paper Mario 64. I want to give a shout out to my channel members, MD Switchy and Nintendo Sixty-Jorts. I really appreciate the financial support from you two, it really means a lot, thank you. Now you're probably wondering about Bonetail as well as the additional bosses added to the remake, and rightfully so, but here's the rub. Bonetail, in my opinion, isn't really different enough from Gloomtail to be worth talking about, and Prince Mush is designed around being able to super guard. With that option not existing in 64, your only means of actually beating him would mean charging up and then beating him in one shot, which for obvious reasons would be very boring. And in the case of Waka, he died. Until next time, check out some more of my videos, and thank you for watching. I'll see you later.